Welcome. This is the first episode of the Batman the Animated Series podcast, which is known as BATTASS for short, BATTASS.
That's, yeah, your name, not mine. We honestly had a really hard time thinking of any name that hasn't been taken. And we thought BatPod, because that's kind of the name of the motorcycle.
Right. Gotham something, but then, you know, people might think we were talking about the show Gotham, which we won't be.
And then we thought about mashing our last names, which are Murphy and McCormack, and we thought McMurphy, but nothing about that is Batman.
We didn't think that. My co-host, Sean Murphy, thought that.
Oh, man, you ratted me out.
And my name is Clay McCormack, and we'll be talking about, this show's going to be talking about Batman the Animated Series, which is the cartoon that the WB or Warner Brothers Animation did in the early 90s. Right. Produced by Bruce Timm and Paul Dini. Mm-hmm. And what about this show? Why are we covering this show? We were talking about it, and every time I personally find that anytime you talk to someone and you ask, what is your definitive version of Batman? 9 times out of 10, they say this show. Right. And we're in a unique space because we're both comic book artists. One of us is a New York Times bestseller, known all around the world. And the other one is Sean Murphy.
Oh.
Hey.
Oh, too bad we can't afford a drum roll.
Season 2. And Sean is actually working on Batman right now.
Yeah, the take for us was, how could we do this in a different way? And because we're both comic artists, we want to talk about this cartoon, looking at it through the lenses of some people who do this as comic books. Mm-hmm. So one of the themes we want to keep touching on in each episode is, you know, what's something that you would like to have drawn? What's something that you would have drawn differently? You know, how would this not have worked as a comic? How did this work as a cartoon? And kind of stuff like that.
Right, and we'll be looking at, you know, costume designs and all that kind of stuff, because they're really unique and they're really different. Right. Compared to pretty much anything that came before it as far as Batman goes.
The other part of this, too, is I'm currently writing and drawing my own Batman gig, hoping to be DC's next Frank Miller, or at least the Frank Miller of my generation. I have the...
I mean, you might want to set a higher bar for yourself.
not to toot my own bad horn. But I have what I consider my dream Batman gig. So I'm looking at this through the eyes of someone who's gone a long way to carve out a space where I can produce my own Dark Knight comic right now. And Clay's coming at it as someone who's getting into comics, who one day will hopefully be doing this sort of thing with his own version of Batman.
And I have seen most of the Batman movies, so I feel quite qualified.
Have you read most of the Batman comics?
Nobody reads anymore.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We're in publishing.
I mean, go out and buy hard copies of anything you can find.
Oh yeah, like the vinyl record of this podcast.
Exactly. But yeah, so our plan here is we're going to do something a little bit different as far as what we'll release it. If you're listening to this, you probably know that we've released every episode at once, kind of like a Netflix model. So we're going to be covering the first season of the show, which we're going to be following the Amazon Prime listing, which is also the DVD listing, I believe. So, you know, if you want to follow along, you can do that easily through either of those two places. Right. And each episode of this show will be covering 2 episodes of the cartoon.
That sounds good, man.
And except for this one. This first episode, we'll be talking about not the first episode of the show, but the animated pencil test pilot that Bruce Timm produced to basically sell the show. Right.
And if you're looking to see that, in case you haven't, because I actually had not seen it until you just sent it to me, that you can Google it, YouTube, and search Dark Knight's First Night.
Yep. Or if you have the DVD box set, I believe it's a special feature on the DVD.
Oh, okay.
Sean, you're working on Batman right now. Yes. What is your definitive version of Batman?
I didn't read the comics a lot. I got introduced to Batman through Michael Keaton and then this cartoon. Mm-hmm. And this cartoon for me was a different sort of cartoon where even as a kid I could tell that there was something different happening here. Right. That Thundercats was not doing. And even revisiting it now as an adult, I feel like there's still so much to pull from. I'd say that like the comic that I'm writing and drawing basically takes place in this animated series universe. My version's a little darker and more adult, and I've changed some of the costumes, but a lot of the marquee characters are there. Like mine is the Mr. Freeze version that has the backstory set in this universe and not the comics,
right,
etc.
Which we'll talk about when we get there, because I believe that backstory, which I think is now part of the comics continuity, didn't exist before that cartoon.
Yep, and Harley
Quinn. Yeah, there's lots of stuff to talk about. Even the first episode, they changed the backstory of Man-Bat, and it'll be really interesting to compare those things.
That's true.
For me, I watched the Adam West show when I was a kid, and I was always aware of Batman. What, you're like the only... Did you never watch the Adam West show?
Have you seen the Adam West show?
Yeah. Have you seen the Adam West show as a kid? It's fantastic.
No, I was busy watching Thundercats.
That's your problem. That show's not good.
No.
But yeah, for me, the thing that really made Batman stand out to me was the Tim Burton Batman.
Yeah.
And I also think that's the biggest influence on this show as well. Or, well, I should say it's there. It's definitely there.
There's a big argument for why it is, but we can get to that later.
Yeah. So before we get to here, we should talk a little bit about, if you're new to Batman for whatever reason, like why is this so different? Where did Batman come from, and how did we get to this point? So before this show, Batman was more or less if you go back to the 60s, talking about the Adam West show, Batman became a joke. He started off as a very character reminiscent of the old pulp novels.
Right.
A guy in a mask with a gun, the Shadow, the Spider, anything like that, creeps around in the darkness and fights crime. He went from that in mainly, I think, because of the comics code that kind of neutered everything. They turned him into kind of they added Robin to the equation, and became a lot more kid-friendly, a lot brighter, and he got really silly.
Right. Then Adam West kind of made it worse with the bam, boom, pow, zap sort of thing.
It made Batman a household name, but it was a household joke, basically.
Yeah, I'm going to backpedal. It wasn't worse. Sure. It was different. It did a lot for the franchise, and it should never be watched again. So then, in the mid-'80s, what most people think happened, and I do too, is that Batman got reinvented by Frank Miller with a comic called The Dark Knight.
Dark Knight Returns.
Oh yeah, that's what it's called.
He doesn't read the books.
I should probably know this.
Yeah.
And his Batman, he brought back being gritty. It was noir. It was brutal. It was violent. It was for adults. Do they swear in that?
A little bit, I think.
Yeah. God damn right they did. And after that came out, I think that Warner Brothers saw the writing on the wall and realized that things probably had progressed enough where they could take a stab at a live-action movie.
Yep. And that brings us to the Tim Burton Batman, which I think, as much as it's influenced by The Dark Knight Returns, I actually was reading The Killing Joke again recently. Right. There's a lot of The Killing Joke in the Burton Batman. Huh. So I think it's those two books are you put those together and you get the 1989 Batman. Right. Which for me that's it. Yeah. Like that's the designs, the costumes, the world. Yeah. It's the Batmobile. Yeah. You're not going to get better than that Batmobile.
Yeah. Even Michael Keaton, who everyone doubted, who wants Mr. Mom in a cape, but he pulled it off.
Right. Yeah.
And after that, I think right before they got ready to release the second movie, or maybe it was just after, someone can fact check me on this on Twitter, they decided to roll forward with a cartoon to sort of make some money off of this. And they went in with a purchase of how many episodes?
It was, I think, around 60, God. which is crazy.
That's a commitment of 3 seasons all at once.
Right. So we're doing the Amazon listing because when we looked at season 1 of Batman the Animated Series, it was 60 episodes. Right. So we're not going to do that.
If you look at I watched the DVDs, or I own them rather, and I think the first season is 26 episodes. So it should be easy enough for people to find them in order, right?
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, once they decided to do this cartoon, I guess we may as well just start talking about the actual short.
So how did you found that because you own the fancy?
Yeah, I remember seeing it, and then recently it popped up somewhere and it refreshed it in my mind. And I'm glad that I remembered it, because I think it's definitely worth talking about.
Yeah.
Because if you're familiar at all with the show, everything is there.
Right.
From the get-go.
Yeah.
The designs, the look of Gotham City, it's all there.
Yeah. I like the Max Fleischer.
Fleischer. Yeah.
Fleischer. Mm-hmm. That influence is amazing. I was taken by how much it looked too much like that. The characters are too smooth and too round, and they have very long arms and short legs, and it's hard to describe, but I'm glad that they switched it up for the more angular look of Bruce Timm's actual style. Because even when you look at the storyboards and his concept art, that was what it became. What got animated was more Max Fleischer. Right.
Yeah, there's definitely more. It's like they spent more time animating the incidental movements, so like you see every flap of the cape.
Right.
If the head turns, you see a lot of the body movement. It's not the kind of animation that you see on a 30-minute cartoon in the 90s.
Yeah. No, it looks good. It does. I will say though, when they're opening fire on Batman and he's just dancing back and forth with no arms,
that's kind of silly.
But knowing what I know about how production gets started off and how hard it is to get things moving sometimes, it seemed like this thing got fast-tracked. They found the right people immediately, and they happened to, through a lot of hard work, I should say, nail it and take the keys, so to speak, and just drive away and return the Batmobile done extremely well. And in a way that even now, looking at the new movies that are coming out, with the same voice actors, like The Killing Joke. It's 25 years later, yet this looks a lot better still.
Right.
It's insane how good it is.
Yeah, and the style of it definitely takes a lot from the Fleischer stuff, because for anyone who doesn't know, Max Fleischer, the Fleischer Studios, produced a series of Superman cartoons in the I think the early 40s. And if you haven't seen them, they're easy to find and they are fantastic. They are awesome.
They are a little bit racist every now and then.
Well, everything was a little bit racist back then.
Right. Well,
everything gets an asterisk. Anyway,
so
the influence of the Fleischer cartoons is evident, because it's got the same sort of Gotham City is very distinct.
Yeah.
It looks like... So this is something that I think carries over from the Burton movies, too, which is the Tim Burton Gotham City is this weird amalgamation of modern and basically like 30s kind of style.
Yeah.
The cars, the cars kind of, but the clothes definitely. The design of the city itself, it has a very retro feel, but they use very modern stuff in the movie.
It's a mix, yeah, and that's actually what this cartoon does well too. Is it's timeless. So people have, Batman has these crazy gadgets. There's a science fiction twist to it, like there's robots, but there's also black and white tube TVs everywhere,
right.
And the cops and everyone still wears top hats. The cars look like they're from the 1950s.
Yep.
This is actually something that I've been doing with mine. Is I just drew a scene the other day with the mayor, and on his desk is the oldest type of telephone I could find, just for no reason.
Right.
And I tried to make the cars look like the Keaton the cop cars from the Keaton movie.
Oh yeah.
Which are 80s Crown Victorias.
Yep.
I don't know. I like it better when the Gotham is timeless.
Yep.
Yeah,
and we were talking about this earlier. I think I always appreciate that, and I think the best way to do it is the way that you're doing it and the way that they do it in the Burton movies, where they create timelessness by not limiting themselves to what time period they're taking stuff from.
Right.
So you'll get stuff from the 50s. So you'll get cars from the 70s. So you'll get, technology from the 80s, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
That way it really blends where it's coming from.
Yeah.
And I think the cartoon does that really well too.
Right.
We don't get too much of it in this short because, it's basically just a panoramic shot of Gotham City.
Right.
But even the thugs that he's fighting on top of the roof are trench coats, fedoras, very classic noir look.
Yeah, there's sort of a deco vibe to some of the buildings. They already are doing that technique where they use airbrush on black construction paper, so they design based off of shadows, basically.
Yeah,
and
which is as far as I know, I don't know any other animation that's ever done that.
I don't know either.
Yeah, that's from what I know. I think that was a pretty revolutionary attempt.
Yeah,
because I mean, it's the only way you can make the city that dark,
right,
and not have
Yeah.
little pieces that you didn't color black or something. It's brilliant.
I mean, even so, you and I both work on white pieces of paper, and you have to add the black.
Right.
And as much as you think you've pushed the blacks in any panel, you can always push it more.
Mm-hmm.
So the way, if you want to come at this the other way, it would be painting white on top of black.
Right.
So you're only painting the white and the highlights. And I feel like that process, you're guaranteed to still end up with mostly black.
Mm-hmm.
Even, you and I starting on white paper, as much black as we add, a lot of the white is still going to leak through because it's just part of the process.
Yeah.
But starting from the get-go with nothing, with immediate darkness, and just adding highlights on like a chair or a desk or the top of Batman's head, that really goes a long way.
Yeah, and I think it really changes the way
Yeah.
you approach the image that you're making too.
Right. Yeah.
Because it really makes you it doesn't make you completely think in reverse, but
Right.
it limits your light sources.
Yeah.
You're really carving stuff out
Yes.
as opposed to just painting stuff on.
Totally, man. It's in a way it almost handicaps you.
Mm-hmm.
It forces you to work in reverse in the way that your brain has never thought about lighting and drawing and all that. And
Right.
I don't know, like in the era of crazy CGI and everyone has After Effects or whatever program they're using now, to handicap yourself and to make it harder for me, like I think you're the same way.
Yeah.
I try to be an old school type of guy. I like analog better, and the idea of painting onto black really goes a long way with me.
Yeah. Oh, me too. I mean, I think when you look at this show, you can see the difference, and it really informs the way they do everything in this show. Because it really forces them to pick out certain things that they want you to see.
Right.
If they want you to see a tree or a plant, then it limits their composition.
It's true, yeah.
And it simplifies things, which for animation is the way to go.
Right,
Because
yeah.
simpler the better.
That's true. I mean, because people are going to be looking at these things for a split second. If you're drawing a background for 3 hours, you're just going to obsess about details.
Right.
No viewer is ever going to appreciate. So by starting on black, you really, like you said, you really target the things that are important, and then you move on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the design of Batman is very much Batman himself. The design of Batman himself is very Fleischer influenced, but it's also got a lot of Toth in there too. Like it feels a lot like the Space Ghost. He's got the big chin, the big barreled chest.
Totally,
and the cape is very solid black or with like a very simple highlight, and it's just the thing for me about this show in general is I feel like this is the first time where the people who created this understood Batman.
Right.
I don't know if that's really
No, it's very that's what's stunning to me is because Batman is worth so much money to go with two guys who came from Tiny Toons.
Yep.
And for you they basically heard about it in passing, immediately scrapped what they were doing, started coming up with character designs and backgrounds, got the green light to go ahead and make a short, and then they were told to produce 66 episodes.
Yeah.
That's insane. Like nothing ever gets done that fast in Hollywood.
Right. And we haven't even talked about Paul Dini yet, which he, as far as I know, was not involved at this point. But
I don't know.
I mean, you take Paul Dini's writing and Bruce Timm's design, and it just it's a good sandwich they made.
Right. It's a hell of a sandwich.
And we were talking about the Dark Knight Returns and how the Dark Knight Returns took things back and made it more gritty. But I think that this show understands the core of Batman even better than that book does.
Right.
Because Dark Knight Returns brought back the grittiness and the darkness to it, but this show really understands where it came from, where the concept came from, the where the origins lie. Like, there's no really pulp stuff in Dark Knight Returns as far as I can remember.
No, I don't think so. But you're right. I mean, do you think this is a totally new way of looking at Batman, knowing the material, or do you think it's the best of Batman funneled into one solid vision? Because you see you see Tim Burton in there. You see Fleischer.
Yep.
you see a lot of the old Bob Kane drawings.
Yep.
So, I mean, to me, it's cherry picks the best of. But then the new thing that this did was do the deco thing.
Right, right.
And streamline it a lot, too, as far as the animation style.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I know I remember when I watched as a kid, the first thing I thought of was the Burton movie style.
Yeah.
But even thinking that, I knew there was something different because the cars in this show and the airplanes and the blimps, they're even more Art Deco-y, even more stylized than they are in the Burton movies.
That's true, yeah. Yeah, you're right. I think that the influence of Dark Knight, of what Frank Miller did, wasn't so much in direct style choices, but Frank made it okay for Batman to be dark.
Right.
And that idea took off, and someone at Warner Brothers understood it. Tim Burton managed to do a successful movie based off of that. And even if Bruce Timm and these guys didn't pull all of the stuff from Tim Burton, they still had the green light to be dark because that's what Frank Miller reclaimed in the 80s.
Right, and I mean, this was coming off of Batman Returns, which I think might still be the darkest Batman movie ever made.
Yeah, I haven't seen that for a while.
It's a weird movie.
Yeah, but not the worst.
No, nope. I enjoy that movie quite a bit, actually.
Yep. Yeah, me too, man. One of the other things I just thought about too was we're used to it now because we grew up with it, but at the time, the stylized animation of this was very strange. To have such a square chin, like literally a right angle at sometimes, with one simple line for a mouth. I don't think animation had done that yet. And I think they did get some resistance, or some people who, they were prepared for some resistance that never came. They ended up thinking like, man, this is so weird. It's deco. I don't know. We're kind of going out on a limb here. When the powers that be see this, they're probably going to tell us to shut us down or ask us to redo it. And it all, as far as I know, went through.
Yeah. Yeah, I know the thing that really stands out to me. This show is kind of like the Jurassic Park of cartoon television shows. Because if you go back, every movie now has tons and tons and tons of CGI, and so much of it looks like garbage.
Right.
And they have the height of modern technology producing the stuff that doesn't look great.
Right.
But if you go back and you look at Jurassic Park now, the CGI in the movie still looks amazing.
Still holds up. Yep.
And I think this show is the same way.
Yeah.
Because even shows that they were making around this time, like this is right in the pocket where I was watching cartoons on Saturday. So you had Batman the Animated Series, you had the X-Men cartoon. For a kid growing up who loved comics, this was the best time to be a kid.
Yeah, you had the Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, yeah.
And so one of the reasons we were talking before about this one is the one that people talk about. This one is the one of all of our peers. This is the Batman that shows up.
Kevin Conroy is Batman for everybody.
Right.
Mark Hamill is the Joker.
Right. Yeah, but what I was curious about is it a timing influence? Is it that you and I were about 10 to 12 years old? We were primed to be the perfect audience for Burton, and then we naturally sank into this stuff? Is it just that... So if we were born 10 years later, would we be into The Batman or whatever new shows are out? Or is it something that's actually successful about this? And I think the argument for this legitimately being good is that I never watched the X-Men and the Spider-Man cartoon that came out at that time.
Yeah.
I still go back to this.
Yeah, and I mean, I do the same thing. Like, if you go back and you look at... I haven't watched Spider-Man in a long time. But if you go back and you watch that X-Men cartoon... It's good, but it's not this good.
It's rough.
I mean, yeah, the animation in that first episode is garbage.
The thing about that episode, even when I was a kid, I knew this, is they really tried to make each frame look like a comic book drawing.
Yeah.
Which means spotted black. So, for example, you would zoom in on Wolverine's yellow, thigh muscles, and it would have black shapes all over the place. And, I mean... Yellow, if you're covered in yellow, you don't make a lot of shadows. It just doesn't make sense. So then they would also be trying
I know, trust me.
Man, I see you wore your blue tights today. But even at the time, even as a 12-year-old, I'm like, man, that does not hold up. Yeah.
The opening credits to the X-Men show, still fantastic. That's like they really leaned into that one.
That theme song's pretty damn good.
Oh, it's so good. And honestly, I mean, that's all you needed back then for most shows. I mean, if you go back and you watch, sorry, Ricardo, but if you go back and you watch Thundercats, the opening theme song and credits of Thundercats is amazing. But those shows are terrible.
So one of the things I wanted that struck me about this, and even though I've never seen this YouTube or this mini kind of explanation of how it got started, I did read about this in one of the books I have about this cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing what I know now, I've been a professional for 13 years. I have done stuff for Hollywood. I have movies that have been optioned. I've been through the process.
You're such a hero.
I'm
Sorry, continue.
It's my studio. You can't make fun of me here. It's insane how little you can really control it. A lot of guys in comics right now, a lot of guys and gals are optioning their books left and right, but there's just so much saturation. What I don't think people realize is 1 out of 100 maybe will get made.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have a buddy who did a book, and he was on the set of the first episode, filming the pilot, holding an actual prop, and it still got canceled.
Oof.
It still did not get picked up, and all he made money-wise was, I think, like 10 grand maybe, or even 40 grand, and that's millions of dollars into the process. You never know when some CEO at Universal or whoever gets fired, some other guy comes in, an actor who says he would do it has a baby, they lose interest. Mm-hmm. You don't cast their friend, so they quit. You cannot control this stuff. Even if you try to come up with some kind of a mechanism to protect your IPs, you just can't do it. And to see how quickly this took off, to go back to like, oh yeah, we're doing this Batman cartoon. 2 days later, hey, I'm Bruce Timm. Here's my Batman designs. Hey, what do you know? This guy over here did all these, these backgrounds. Oh, what do you know? It just came together. That never fucking happens.
Yeah.
It's insane how well it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and it's for something that, they're coming on. I don't know if they were lucky because they were working in animation, so maybe they had fewer eyes on them or something. But at the same time, it's Batman. Yeah, Batman's not a small property, especially coming off that second Burton movie.
Yeah,
that's a big deal.
They knew there was money to be made, and they went in for 66 episodes. I mean, I would love to be in the meeting where they're like, "We want to hire this guy, Bruce Timm. He's done Tiny Toons. Like, who was the guy that?" There must have been some discussion, like, but Tiny Toons isn't Batman.
Yeah,
that's how
I'm
executives
sure,
are.
I get the impression that they didn't know it was going to be good. So let me backtrack a little bit.
Right.
To be fair, Tiny Toons, great show. They were doing really good animation, really good shows at Warner Brothers at the time.
Right.
So I mean, it's the guys who are coming off this. I think Paul Dini also was on Tiny Toons. So these guys aren't schlubs. They know what they're doing. They've been around for. I know Paul Dini had been around for a long time doing animation. I think, and I could be wrong. Mm-hmm. Feel free to correct me, internet. That he was doing He-Man, I think, or one of those shows. Like that was like one of his first jobs, was doing one of those older shows.
Yeah.
And I think there were so many cartoons at this time. I mean, this is the era where you had the Beetlejuice cartoon.
Right.
You had the. There was a Rambo cartoon.
Oh, yeah.
There was a RoboCop cartoon.
Oh, RoboCop? What's that?
There were cartoons of anything. They were just throwing money at whatever would stick.
Yeah, the 80s, the dirty 80s were the time when they were making cartoons in order to sell toys. It was nuts. Yeah. And I think the 90s came and they tried to have another decade where they started doing the same. So you saw weird ideas, like some of them that took off, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yep. But then you saw
Street Sharks,
Biker Mice from Mars.
Mice from Mars.
Silver Striker Street Force or
and
whatever.
It's really weird to look back at this era too, because we were talking about this is darker than Batman had ever been, but like this was the era where they were making kids toys out of like Terminator 2.
Yeah.
And RoboCop. RoboCop is one of the most violent movies I've ever seen, and there are kids toys.
Just to prepare everybody, RoboCop, Clay is going to mention that movie a lot in this podcast.
So we're going to make 3 eposodes into Batman, and then this is going to very, very subtly turn into a RoboCop podcast.
Real subtle.
Real subtle. But my point is, like, they were throwing. They didn't care if it was an R-rated movie. Like, think about everywhere. Now. Yeah. Think about now, where these studios are so paranoid about rating,
right,
because they don't think they can sell things to kids.
Right.
There were R-rated movies with toys that were not, and it's not like now where you have toys that are aimed at like adult collectors, and that where they make. Right. They're making retro toys out of Escape from New York and all that kind of garbage.
I knew you were going to go there.
Well, that's the first one that popped into my head. I have a very limited knowledge set of things I can draw.
Let me see. RoboCop, Escape from New York.
That's about it. It's going to be a lot of similar analogies in the show. But it wasn't like that. They were grasping. There was the Toxic Avenger had a cartoon. The Toxic Avenger is a trauma movie that's like an exploitation horror movie. It's like and
well, the difference with some of these things you're mentioning, from what I hear, is that they were cartoons by committee.
Yeah,
and they weren't cartoons done by a select smaller group who really knew what they were doing. And that's the difference. So when the Suits, for the lack of better definitions, we have the Suits and you have
City
the
Hall,
type.
the Man.
So when the Man made He-Man and the Man
let's be fair,
made Thundercats, they did it having a toy deal in place, probably, knowing they had a company in China or Taiwan to produce these things. And that's when the Man and the committee or the Suits stepped in and they started cranking these things out. It didn't matter that Terminator 2 was for adults. The toys would be bought by the kids.
Right.
And that they knew that those kids would grow up and then they would see future Terminator things and they would make money all over again. It's like selling toy Humvees to little kids. So one day they can buy their big ones. And
it's Star Wars hangover too, because Star Wars blew that thing wide open.
That's true, yeah.
But yeah, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
Nope.
But yeah, I think what I was getting to was that there was so much of that stuff out there that I don't think they expected the quality they ended up getting.
Right.
Because they could have ordered 60 episodes of a Batman cartoon regardless of quality and still made toys and still sold those toys. Right. But I don't think they were expecting Heart of Ice or Mad Love or Mask of the Phantasm or anything like that.
I'm gonna say there's a lot of luck and timing and hiring the right people at the right time to do this, and also not only guys who got it, but guys who were good at protecting the IP with all the employees underneath them. Like Bruce Timm will fight for it. He's not going to accept bad work, and it's not enough to just be talented, but you have to be a good boss and good producer, and embrace the best in people, cancel ideas that aren't working out, and those are rare qualities to find in one creative type of person. Oh,
definitely, yeah. I think they got really lucky with the people they ended up getting for the show.
I also think that the reason that if Warner Brothers at the time with this situation functions anything like comics, the people that make the ideas and sign off on them are different than the people who write the paychecks, who are different than the people who create the schedules, different than the people who, things are so...
it's all one guy, actually. His name's Chris.
Chris Warner.
But no relation, actually.
That's weird.
Yeah.
I thought it was nepotism.
Yeah.
But I don't... You think that, at least with the way comics works, you look at the Marvel and DC as two well-run, well-oiled machines, and they're really not.
Here we go.
Bunch of disconnected pieces, and things get approved, and the higher-ups aren't aware of what someone else has paid for. And, even the book now I'm not answering to anybody except for one guy, my editor.
I'd like to say that I love both of these companies and would be happy to work with either one of them.
I have nothing to lose, and I'm burning my bridge. And don't hire Clay because he's my friend.
By the time this comes out, that book will be on the shelves anyway, so you'll have made your money.
That's true, yeah.
No, but I totally understand what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, it's just so disjointed. Like they signed me, I got a signing bonus to do this gig. I pitched an idea that one editor approved of, and I don't think he's run it by anybody in the office. I'm not on the phone every day with Warner Brothers. They have no idea what I'm concocting. I am, I think, creating something that is in the wheelhouse, that pushes boundaries and reinvents things, but also stays true to Gotham. But for all they know, I could be just some idiot who's drawing all these sex scenes between, Joker and Harley, and there's no accountability. And I'm dying to know from someone like Frank Miller, when he did Dark Knight, what was his accountability? Did he call his editor every day? Did they have to walk him through? Did he go in for meetings? Did he have to meet with executives? Or was he just off the grid like I am and just delivered something that they needed, but they didn't know they needed?
Yeah.
Just like what Bruce Timm did.
Yeah. Well, join us next week when Frank Miller will be on the podcast to answer all the questions that we both have about all of these things. About everything he said and where he gets his hats.
Maybe I'll get him. No.
But so another thing we're probably going to do, just because why not? You know, if you've, I don't know if you've heard us on another podcast, we frequent a Star Trek podcast called The Penske File.
But this is better, Wes.
At the end of every episode, we give a rating out for each episode. We figured we'd do it just for the hell of it.
Right.
So, what do you think for this as a pilot? What would you give this a 1 to 5 rating?
This podcast we're in, or as the pilot?
Well, either way. I mean, if the podcast is like a 2, we can probably this will be the only episode, I guess.
Man, it was totally an unfair rating. I'll go 4 because it was amazing. But knowing what I know about how the show eventually turned out, the Fleischer stuff was a little goofy. I feel weird giving it a rating. Maybe I should say 5.
Yeah, I would say 5 just because
I want to work for DC one day.
No.
Composure, Clay. Composure. Right.
No, I would give it a 5. I think I would give it a 5 because right out of the gate, they nail it. Like, they don't change. Like you're saying, there's a little bit of tweaking to do, but everything is there.
Right.
You know, the design of Batman, the design of the city, they don't change much stylistically when they get to the actual series.
Yep.
And true. I can't think of, like, even if you go back, you look at the Ghostbusters cartoon from the 80s, there's a similar thing to this for that show, which ended up becoming, much like this did for Batman, the animation they used for this Ghostbusters test became more or less what the opening credits are for the Ghostbusters cartoon.
Which Ghostbusters?
The real Ghostbusters.
Is it the one with the ghost car?
No. It's not the one with the gorilla. Oh, boy.
Sorry.
Did you watch... Did you
watch
take in anything as a child?
I remember... Hey, you know what? I got a career out of this shit. I don't need to... You don't have to know it to be good at it.
Fair enough.
I don't know why. I agree. I should know more about this. I am just as turned off by my lack of education as you are.
You were just an 8-year-old doing sit-ups and pull-ups in the backyard.
Yeah, man. It's like I was born knowing karate and I mastered kung fu without even giving a shit.
But anyway, so if you go back and you watch that early test for the Ghostbusters cartoon, it's mostly there, but they do tweak stuff. They change the colors of the suits. They change the color of the color and style of Egon's hair.
Right.
This is pretty much there. Like, they don't change Batman at all.
That's true.
He's pretty much the way he is through the whole show until they redesign for the second series there.
They do eventually give him arms, though.
Yeah. He doesn't dance through bullets as much in the show.
Not as much. Or he does it in a more masculine way.
But, you know, it's all there. The Commissioner Gordon, Commissioner Gordon shows up for like half a second in this thing. Yeah. They don't change the design on Gordon at all, basically.
No,
he's pretty much the same.
He still has that dairy whipped white hair.
And the city and everything. And, I mean, for the first attempt, knocking it out of the park, I can't give it less than a 5.
I'm gonna go 5 too, because I don't want people to get mad at me. I have a career to maintain as well. I'll go 6.
Okay. All right. But, I mean, unless you have something else to talk about, I think that pretty much covers it.
Yeah. No, man, we'll get into the rest of it later. So our tradition will be, I'll ask you, what scene would you have liked to have drawn? But the whole thing is one scene, I guess. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would love to draw a dance sequence featuring Batman.
Of course you would.
Just dancing through the bullets as though he doesn't even know they're there. Like pollen off of flowers.
What?
I don't know. I've been watching too many Ridley Scott movies.
Oh, man.
Yourself?
I really love the first pan shot of the city.
Yeah.
I'm crazy. I'm one of the only people in comics, I think, who likes drawing backgrounds. And especially doing big, complicated cityscapes. I really enjoy that. So I think that would be fun to draw. It would just be the first 10 seconds of it.
Yeah.
Before you even see Batman, maybe.
Yeah. No, I mean, that shot really, it tells you everything about Gotham City. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's really impressive to be able to pull that off.
Right.
Yeah. So that pretty much sums it up for this first episode. If you liked it, if you heard this on iTunes, please give us a rating or review. We have a Twitter and an email address which has not been finalized yet, but it'll be at the tail end of this, so I'll let you know where to send stuff if you want to follow us. But yeah, thank you for listening to the first episode. And like I said, this should all be released at the same time. So follow us in the next episode where I believe we'll be covering On Leather Wings and Christmas with the Joker.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, guys. Hey everyone, if you have questions, comments, or feedback on the show, feel free to drop us a line at our email address, which is battasspodcast@gmail.com. That's BATTASS podcast@gmail.com. Or find us on Twitter at BATTASS Podcast. That's at BATTASS Podcast. Thanks, guys.